The first time I heard of the Arctic island I now call home was in 2015 when some of my colleagues in Gothenburg, Sweden, told me about their plans to go to Svalbard to work in the restaurant business. I was initially puzzled, as up until this point I hadn't been aware of the island's existence. This was especially surprising since it was governed by our neighboring country of Norway. When my colleagues mentioned it was a place where polar bears roam and the locals deal with extreme seasons and endless daylight or total darkness, I knew this was the kind of adventurous place I wanted to visit. For my entire adult life, I had lived in larger cities. I was following a similar path that my dad had by climbing the corporate ladder. I realized that following this path had me pursuing a dream that aligned more with societal expectations rather than my own personal aspirations. The appeal of the bustling city life and the traditional career path kept me on track with what I thought I should do, without really exploring what truly mattered to me. Right out of high school, I had started working within hospitality, purposefully steering myself away from the university route, which I knew wasn't for me. When I made this decision, it was because I didn't want to be anything specific, and I never really excelled in school anyway. The realization that I was on the wrong path only dawned on me later, once I moved to London and secured a job that could have been the beginning of the successful career I had envisioned. Unfortunately, I didn't like anything about this London life. It wasn't so much the job as I genuinely enjoyed hospitality, but there was something else I couldn't really pinpoint at the time that didn't feel right. This revelation jolted my original plans, leading me to leave London and return to Sweden for a while. Back in my home country, I continued to work in the hospitality industry, but I also made time to go on a bunch of adventures. Hiking in Norway's beautiful mountains with my best friend was like stepping into a living postcard, surrounded by breathtaking views at every turn. And then one time, I impulsively teamed up with a stranger for a 26.1 mile, which is 42 kilometers, swim run just 2 days before the race. There was also the time I went road biking along Portugal's coast with my mom. We biked over mountains and along sun-soaked beaches, making pit stops for a meia de leite, coffee with milk, in every enchanting town we encountered. However, our enthusiasm for gin and tonics during dinner later that evening resulted in a rather painful 43.5 mile, which is 70 kilometers, ride back home the following day. When I reflect on the memories I made during my early 20s, it brings a smile to my face. But sometimes you just need a reset to pave the way for a new plan. So when my colleagues began discussing their move to an island near the North Pole, I was all ears. I managed to get a job at the same restaurant they'd been hired at, and 3 months later, I found myself boarding a flight to Longyearbyen, Svalbard. As I arrived in Longyearbyen for the first time in November, the town greeted me in total darkness, and a sense of calm washed over me. At this moment, I knew I was finally stepping onto the right path. Embracing the darkness. The drive from the Longyearbyen airport to the apartment where I'd be staying proved to be a swift one, and didn't offer much insight into where I was going to be spending the coming months. Peering out the taxi's windows, I was met by darkness. The sky was pitch black in all directions. The faint glowing lights of Longyearbyen was the only brightness visible as we drove towards the town's center. Within 5 minutes of getting into the taxi, I found myself standing outside my new home, a somewhat shoddy apartment building in the middle of town. From where I stood, I had a clear view of the village and the mountains that encircled it. It dawned on me that Longyearbyen is nestled within a valley, the mountain walls that surround it serving as a kind of protection against the elements. I dropped off my belongings in the apartment and decided to go for a walk through town in the early afternoon darkness. It was a chilly day at 5 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 15 degrees Celsius, with no wind, and the sound of my footsteps was muffled by the thick layer of snow on the ground. One thing stood out to me right away: the deafening silence. As I walked further, I noticed a couple strolling along the main street, under the glow of lights that were lining the path, creating what looked like an illuminated maze in the darkness. Faint shrieks of joy from kindergarten children playing outside in the fenced-in playground area reached my ears as a reindeer crossed the street right in front of me and proceeded to graze in the deep snow. This is a magical place, I thought to myself.